Hi everyone, it's Vaishnavi. I am so sorry that I haven't been on the channel as much recently. Things have been crazy since the start of the pandemic, as I'm sure all of you have experienced. And before we start out the video today, I just want to thank you all so much for continuing to stay engaged with our channel and continuing to want to feed your hunger for reproductive justice and feminist work. It really does mean a lot to us to have such incredible subscribers who are so supportive, especially during such times. That being said, we're nearing the end of this roller coaster of a year, and I've noticed that there are a lot of things this year that have made me feel powerless, whether it's something going on politically, something going on in the public health realm, or things that pop up from day to day that make me personally feel powerless. And for me, that sort of feeling is really difficult for me to have because I'm the kind of person that wants to do as much as I can to change injustice in the world. And it's incredibly difficult, right? We can't put that stress on ourselves all the time to address every single issue that we see. One of the things, however, that's really important to me and near to my heart is reproductive health. And because I'm a woman of color and I've seen lots of issues that women of color face in reproductive health, specifically that identity and its intersection in reproductive health is important to me. And I think it's a good display of how we can feel trapped by powerlessness from the different intersecting oppressions that we feel in society. So, today, my plan was to give you all a presentation that I've been doing for a while about women of color, reproductive health, and our own power in advocating for reproductive health choices that are right for us. I've done this presentation at the Elon University Women of Color Institute. I've done it at the Feminist Majority Conference in DC, and I've done it at the Women of Worth Conference at Chapel Hill. However, for some reason, it's been deleted from my Google Drive, and so I just can't find it. And I'm so disappointed because I really wanted to share it with you all. I found a live stream of myself, however, presenting it at the Women of Color conference uh, in Chapel Hill. And so I'll start this live stream after this short intro. But the reason I wanted to put up this video at this time during the year is because I want to remind you all that we do have power to change the things that are impacting us negatively. Even small things that we do can be incredibly important in shifting the realities around us. And because we're nearing the end of the year, we don't know what next year will bring. And I'm honestly so thankful for the experiences and opportunities that I've had this year, and yet I know it's caused so much sorrow for so many people. And so, before the next year starts, I want to remind all of you that we have power, that we have hope, and that we are resilient to push forward and create the realities that we want to see. I hope that this live stream of my presentation will remind you all of that fact and give you some strategies to push forth for the changes that you want to see in the world. Again, I'm so incredibly grateful for all of you, and I'm so thankful that you allow us all a platform to share these things that are impactful to us. And I'm so honestly fortunate to be able to do this work. That being said, I know that the video that I'm going to show is going to be of lower quality. It's a bit of an older live stream. But if you have any questions, please feel free to comment, and please feel free to skip around in the live stream a little bit. I know it's a little bit long, and I personally will answer all of your questions in the comments. I'm honestly cannot express my gratitude at a deeper level. I'm so thankful to be doing this work, and I'm so thankful for you all for letting us continue to do this work and for your continued support. With that being said, please enjoy this live stream, and I'll hop back in at the end to follow up. Hey, so yeah, hi everyone. My name is Vaishnavi Suvikarupu. And today, well, actually, let me just go to the previous slide to like have a good intro. All right, so today we're going to be talking about women of color in reproductive health, which is a field that's very near and dear to my heart. And today I'm going to accomplish three things. I'm going to tell you my story, why I got into reproductive health, how I got into reproductive health as a young woman of color. I'm going to tell you pretty much how difficult it was, and also like the consequences of that difficulty. So what are the consequences of having a lack of women in reproductive health? Spoiler alert, they are dire. And lastly, I'm going to tell you how you can get involved in reproductive health, but you're all like pretty incredible young advocates, so I don't think that that will be an integral part of this presentation. So let me see if okay, yeah, so my name is Vaishnavi, and these are the three things that I'm going to talk about today. I just wanted to kind of introduce myself a little bit. So I'm a first-year student at UNC. And yeah, I know, I usually get that reaction. People are like, really? Like, you're such a baby. It's usually like, you're such a baby, or like, wow, like, how are you so young? Like, I was born this way. But I'm a first-year student at UNC. I'm from Mooresville, North Carolina. And I went to high school in Durham. And I've been involved in reproductive health since I was like 10, I think, and I'll let you know why that was such an integral age for me. So, oh no, I thought it could be cool, but I have to like keep adjusting. Okay. So I'm going to talk about So I'm going to talk about my story first off, what it's like for me being a young woman of color in reproductive health. But before I start with that, I'm going to talk about some of my credentials and like what I've done to make me seem like legit. This slide, fun fact, makes me seem a lot more professional than I am. But yeah, so these are all the things I have done in the past. When I was younger, I started a reproductive health podcast, and I taught gynecology seminars in North Carolina. So I worked with the Boys and Girls Club, and I taught them all around North Carolina, specifically in rural areas where it can be really hard to get that kind of education. And I've also spoken at a bunch of different conferences, so like this one and the National Young Feminist Leadership one in DC, and like a few others here and there. So I was really able to get involved with this, but it wasn't easy. You know, there's a lot of things that really held me back. And so I made this helpful diagram for, at least personally, what I see, what holds women of color specifically back from reproductive education. So at the core, we all have passion for reproductive education, for women's empowerment, for people's rights. But we're limited by all of these other things. And the most pertinent to women of color, I feel, is cultural shame and restrictions. So I'm Indian, and I'm Hindu, and it's a culture, not a religion, of a lot of restriction, and it's a lot of conservatism. And I'm sure, you know, other like people of color feel the same sort of cultural restriction. So it's really hard for me to, you know, be speaking at these conferences, be seeing all of this, be like saying all of these like really radical feminist things, but at home, like I would see a lot of sexism come back to me. You know, at home, like I still see my dad like tell my mom to cook things and like not do anything himself. And I saw how difficult it was for my mom to get a job in America, or like to learn how to drive and things like that. And it was really hard for me to face that dichotomy of seeing like I'm advocating for these things, but at home I see something completely different. Right? Like I see something completely different in my community. And not only that, but sometimes people of color communities will shame people of color who choose to go into reproductive advocacy because of that hesitancy towards the female reproductive system. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back. And, you know, especially in person of color communities, like, I want to say like honor is kind of important. So like I know if I do something big, like my parents are like, oh my God, you know what my daughter did? Has anyone experienced that? Yeah, my mom doesn't do that as much anymore because she's like, well, you know, if they want to know, they'll know. And if they don't want to know, then they'll just feel jealous secretly. So I think it can be difficult to get into reproductive health initially because of that shame barrier, because of that cultural barrier. But for me, ultimately, I didn't do this in spite of my culture. I did it because of it. I did it because I saw all of these, all this hypocrisy in my culture where, like you're saying, you should respect goddesses, but not women when they go out in the streets. And I did it because I saw a lot of sexism in my culture, and it's important to me. And I didn't want Indians to have to face that anymore. So that was an important starting point for me. And I think hopefully in the future, more people of color communities can get behind the idea of reproductive health. So secondly, what I saw is the fear of social backlash, which I had previously touched upon, because you're not only putting yourself on the line, you're putting your family on the line, right? Like it's like Saba was talking about earlier. Her parents were telling her about how they were dying of shame of having a daughter like her and things like that. And that can be really hard because you love your family in most cases. And it can be hard to put yourself on the line and your family on the line also. So when I talk about my story, I try not to involve like too many details about my family. Like Saba was saying, like I have chosen to be public, but they have not. And it can help to empower you to do more work just with that knowledge that, you know, you haven't put your family on the line. And thirdly is viability. So has anyone heard like the stereotype that like a lot of Asian people want to be doctors, or like a lot of people of color like are pushed into STEM fields? Yeah. And it's because, and I can understand behind it why. It's because, you know, my parents have experienced so much struggle and I have experienced so much struggle, and they don't want me to squander that by getting into a career field that they don't deem as viable, you know? And so how I overcome that is thinking like, a career field that's viable to my parents is a field that produces financial stability, right? So it's like money, like they don't want me to be, you know, dependent on anyone or like be unstable in any way. But for me, I'm living this life, and for me, a viable career is a career that brings me happiness, and in addition to some financial stability, because ultimately what we do in life is to be happy, or for my sister, what we do in life is for food, but it's like the alternate thing. But ultimately what I do in my life is to be happy and bring joy to myself and create the change I want to see in the world. And for me, that's stability. And I know that my parents and most immigrant parents ultimately just want to see their kids happy. And that's where I fit in viability into my work. So now that we've discussed all of these things that hold women of color back from reproductive advocacy, I kind of want to talk about how, like, why it's so important for women of color to be in reproductive advocacy. So I'm going to talk about the consequences of having a lack of women of color in the reproductive healthcare field. So I'm going to provide some fast facts real quick. So Black women in particular have a really hard time giving birth in America. I'm really sorry, it's kind of an atrocity. They are 4 times more likely to have pregnancy complications, and that's like, wow, it's like a massive, it's like a 400% increase. More likely to have pregnancy complications, and also with pregnancy complications can come postpartum depression. And Black women are constantly faced with having this narrative of like, you know, the strong, like, woman who like is industrious and keeps moving forward. So it can be even more difficult to deal with postpartum depression because you're expecting to be like the strong woman that like keeps pushing forward, like works even though you have a baby and things like that. And it can be kind of difficult to manage that along with having pregnancy complications. Secondly, there's been a 26% jump in the maternal mortality rate of Black women since 2000. This is actually from 2002 to 2014, so it's like just 14 years. It's like almost a 30% increase. And that is terrible. That's literally mothers who are dying because they're giving birth. And we can't stand for that. And only 18.4% of OBGYNs are underrepresented minorities. That seems like a really small percent, but that's actually the highest in any specialized medical profession. It's actually the highest amount of underrepresented minority representation, but we need more, you know, like these numbers say we need more people who understand the struggles of women of color and people who identify with that and people who are able to listen to the pain of women of color. So I think a famous example of this is Serena Williams. Has everyone heard of that? Yeah, so when she had her blood clots, like nobody would listen to her, and nobody would help her with her pregnancy complications, and even when she had to wear a catsuit to her tennis match, like people wouldn't let her wear the catsuit even though it was like necessary for her. And if this can happen to Serena Williams, a goddess on earth, like it happens to so many other people who are so much more disenfranchised, and we can't stand for that. Okay, so firstly I want to talk about maternal mortality because it really bothers me to see people dying over the natural act of giving birth, you know, and how important it is to have women of color in maternal mortality for 2 reasons. So firstly, in the United States, It's the only developed country where maternal mortality rates are actually increasing, like steadily. They're not decreasing, they're actually like since been increasing, which is really counter intuitive, right? Like you think like we're a developed country, we have all this medical technology, yet maternal mortality rates specifically for Black women and women of color are increasing. And it's really, really nerve-wracking because like I don't know how to overstate the magnitude of this. These are mothers that are dying, you know. It's terrible to imagine losing a loved one just because they're giving birth. So this is why it's so important to have women of color doctors and women of color healthcare providers in the reproductive health field to recognize the pain of women of color and to provide accurate, culturally appropriate treatment. There isn't really an appropriate like medical solution to that wouldn't just be like, you know, putting a band-aid on it. But that's why we need to dismantle systemic racism, because, you know, premature babies have a much harder time getting started in life than people who are not born premature. And it's just like a whole system that has actual consequences brought on by systemic racism that we really need to solve. And why we need more women of color in medicine, again, why we need more doctors who are aware of social issues so that we can help prevent these issues from inflecting generations of people in the future. Okay, cool. So moving on from that, I want to talk about the benefits now, the good parts of having women of color providers in 3 different areas. So you brought up that teen pregnancy disproportionately impacts women of color. So by having women of color who are healthcare providers, it can actually help to reduce the rate of teen pregnancy because they're more comfortable talking to them about their sex lives, or like about where can I find protection, how can I seek protection, and more likely to go for regular checkups if they know that it's a doctor who is a part of their community and who won't judge them. That can happen for somebody who's not a woman of color also, but it's just better to have someone that patients would feel more comfortable with. And by having a provider that is a part of your community, or like understands you and doesn't judge you, can make it more likely to go get those regular checkups that can prevent that cancer from spreading to a later stage. Same thing for breast cancer and a lot of other gynecologic cancers. Yeah. So now that you know about how important it is to be a woman of color in healthcare, I'm going to talk about how you can get involved. And also, yeah, women of color really impact women of color where it matters the most, our bodily autonomy. So I remember taking women's and gender studies class here with Dr. Tanya Shields. Does anyone know who that is? Yeah, she's great. So she was saying reproductive autonomy is the one thing that separates us from having complete equality with men. It's really that autonomy to take control of our own bodies, literally things that are our possession, our bodies, our reproductive systems. It is the one thing that separates us from being on that same footing for men to advocate for higher things like gender equality, pay equality. It really starts with reproductive advocacy. And that's where women of color can help the most. So yeah, now I'm going to talk to you about some action steps because you know how crucial it is to take part in this field as a woman of color to help other women of color. So firstly, there's, for me, a 3-pronged approach, or like a 3-step approach to being an advocate for reproductive rights. Firstly, it starts with you. And I think it's so important for advocates to take care of themselves, because you don't want to be burned out too young, and you don't want to feel like you're not doing enough for the field that you are. I assure you, you're doing enough. Like, just by being here, you're doing enough. Change really starts interpersonally. It starts with you and extends firstly to the people of your community, so your friends, your peers, people you are more comfortable with. I know people will say like, get out of your comfort zone. You know, people will say like, go up to like anti-abortion protesters and say you're wrong, or things like that. Like that type of, right? Yeah, like that type of protest is really glamorized, and that type of like getting arrested like for your rights is really glamorized. But women of color don't have that privilege. No, like sorry, like like not for me.
I believe we get jobs in the future.
Yeah, like I need to get a job. Like I'm not white. Like, so don't feel bad if you don't take those aggressive action steps. Just educating your friends, your family, yourself is more than enough. And then maybe like talk to strangers that you know a little. Like, okay, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So those are the 3 ways I feel like women of color can really get into reproductive health, because you don't absolutely have to like be super abrasive and be like, no, this is what I believe. You know what I'm saying? If that's your style, that's fine. But I feel like it's not often conducive to women of color. Okay, so for UNC students specifically, there's a lot of advocacy opportunities on campus. So through the Carolina Women's Center, who's organized this event, they provide a lot of trainings for sexual assault, like Haven, Embody. They have alternative spring breaks where you can go work on a gender service project. And it's really like that type of grassroots advocacy that gets you knowledgeable about the population you're trying to help. And the UNC Birth Partners program lets you doula, like there's like, they have a volunteer doula program that you can apply into. I think that's pretty great. And we definitely need more women of color doulas, so please look into that. And lastly, there's lots of publishing that you can do if you know, maybe protesting is not right for you, maybe like direct advocacy is not right for you in this instance. There's a lot of publishing you can do. So I know like the Health Humanities Journal, there's the Siren, a feminist journal, Feminist Students United. So there's various feminist publications that you can write and publish to, and they accept publications from undergrads and also like grad students, master students. And lastly, online resources like the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has volunteer positions, Planned Parenthood, the National Abortion Network has all these volunteer positions, and they're pretty anonymous, and they're just crying out for women of color to join. So for the larger community,
can I just ask you a question? Do you volunteer at any of these places that you just mentioned? And could you share, if you do, what your experience has been and what responsibilities you've helped?
Yeah, I think everything is like really different, but I volunteered at the Carolina Women's Center, and I applied to be a doula with Birth Partners. I hear back on Monday, so like we'll see. But yeah, that, and I used to work for the Red Cross. So like that was like my main line of volunteering. I was there for like 8 years. They really helped me a lot when I first immigrated to America. But for the Red Cross, that's where I like really found that Red Cross like helps all people, but I was like, but I really want to help women though, you know. So that's what like I got really into. And I also volunteered with CAGE, the like gender equality, and most of those positions are like administrative, you know, so like they need people to like, you know, do their books for them, or like you know, send forms, sign forms, like do advocacy, publicity, things like that. But I would say like most volunteer positions are really tailored to the person who's volunteering. It's like if you're good at making flyers, you know, then they might want you to like do a publicity flyer. If you're like good at speaking, they might want you to write a speech or like speak for them, or things like that. But I would say, in my experience, most of the reproductive health organizations I volunteered at are pretty flexible because they want good quality work, and that can only come from when the person is treated well, and also from when they're doing things that they think they're good at, you know. So like this summer I'm working at the Polly Murray Project, and I think Polly Murray is great. I'm also living at the same church that they used to preach in, and I think Polly Murray is great, but I'm really into sexual health, right? So I was like, so yeah, Polly Murray really advocated for human rights, and for me, the greatest human right is having the knowledge of your body. So would it be okay if I was to do something sexual health related? And they were like, they seemed pretty chill with that, you know? So I feel like just using your talents to help this community that you feel so strongly about, or help this cause that you feel so strongly about, because you really can't go wrong. Does that help answer?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So for the larger community, change really does start interpersonally, but I do want to say you don't owe anyone a debate. I learned that the hard way. So put your energy where it matters the most. Don't let anybody make you feel like because you're not talking to them, then you're not contributing to your cause, because like I assure you, you are, and they just want to like suck the life out of you, you know. They're like dementors in that way. Yeah, so I just want to let you know that change does start interpersonally, but it starts with talking with yourself, your friends, your peer groups. You don't owe anybody a debate or anybody an explanation of what you're doing. And then lastly, I want to end with this slide. From a photo taken at the Women's March, and I want to say that the most important thing in reproductive advocacy is doing your best, and that might come in multiple different forms. So for me, it's like digital advocacy. Like I don't really do well when I have to go up to like people and say like, hey, I think you're wrong, you know. Like I don't really do well with that. Some people do. So for me, it's digital advocacy. Like I like publishing, I like writing, and some people like going up to people and being like, hey, you suck, you know? And so for some people, they like making flyers and publicizing different events. Some people like organizing those events. And everybody just is doing their best, and that's all you can ask of yourselves. And I hope you will take that with you into whatever you do, because doing your best is all you can ask of yourself, and you can't fault yourself for that. So in that regard, thank you for coming to my presentation. I will take any questions now. Thank you. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I will personally answer them. And I'm so thankful that you all spent time watching my presentation today. I'm truly so disheartened that I wasn't able to find it and I couldn't do a live presentation for you all, but I hope that this will be enough to prove that you not only have the power to change the things that you want to change, but that you have some strategies now in order to move forward and enact the change that you would like to see in the world, specifically in terms of women of color and reproductive health. I know reproductive health has been a really hot topic this year, and for good reason. And if you'd like to engage in other organizations other than the ones that I've mentioned in my presentation, I've dropped some links to ones in the description. Please feel free to reach out, ask any questions that you may have, and be engaged, because we all have the ability and the power to do as much change as we see fit. Everyone makes change in their own ways, and everyone is able to push for a better world. And I do hope that the things that I've shared today will be beneficial to you. I'm so thankful again for your time, and I know it's been a while since I've been on this channel. We will ramp up more videos next year, and we really do hope that you all have a great new year, that you had a great holiday season, and that next year will bring forth many more blessings than this year has. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to engaging with you all in the comments.